Thanks, folks. It's my job to sort of do something about wrapping all of this up, and it's been such a tremendous conference, it's almost an impossible task. Thank you, Tim, very much for the words. The gift of the generations is the wisdom that we share. If only I'd had this quote, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. At school, earlier this year, a young colleague of mine, I'm sure you can guess who it was, showed me something on Facebook. Ever heard of Facebook? No. Yes, no. Anyway, you young people, you know what I'm talking about. And Facebook apparently is all about our identity. It's who we are. It's lots of photos about what we're doing. And it's how we tell people about ourselves. And she was explaining to me, James, this is a meme. And I said, oh, that's lovely. It's a meme, James, you know, that's what it is. And I said, good, what is a meme? And she said, it's a photo. And I said, is it? What Greek word does that come from? And she said, Greek word? And I said, mimesis. And she said, that's a cocktail, a mimosa. And I said, no, mimesis is a Greek word from which we've derived this term, memes. Do you know what it means? She's a remarkable girl. Of course, she wanted to find out what did it mean. In the Greek, what does it mean? Like imitation, semblance, resemblance. If you like, even personal expression. What has it come to mean more latterly? It's a philosophical, critical term, but perhaps the thing I'm interested in, it has a range of meanings, is what the biologist Richard Dawkins talks about in terms of memes. He likens memes to something akin to genes, the chemical encoding of a set of genes that form an expression which makes me, me, and you. And somehow he believes that memes are the cultural expressions. These are the ideas and the thoughts and the feelings, the experience, and somehow, just like genes, they are transferred. Not chemically, obviously, but somehow this intangible stuff of humankind is transferred, one to another, from parent to child, from child and parent into that broader community, into some sense of who we are as a country, but who we are as humans. What's interesting about this notion then is that memes, this idea of something that somehow we get from the people before us, the wisdom of the generations, the memes reflect the past. There's so much more than the nice meal that you've taken a photo of at that new cafe. And it's nice that you've got a photo of that on Facebook, but that is not your whole identity, let me tell you. Somehow these memes are some sort of capture of what has gone on in the past for us as humankind and been passed on. And memes are talked about in the literature, most particularly in terms of the arts and arts artefacts. Now, you and I, we work in the arts, and we understand that a piece of music reflects something about who we are. And there's something about that that's more than the notes, isn't there? And we could talk about the particular phrases in the text, but that whole thing becomes part of what we share and part of what goes on. Those of you who know me know that I'm a particular fan of the writer Lawrence van der Post, born in Botswana, of Calvinist parents, a European background. But he grew up amongst the Matabele people, and he had a Bushman nurse from the San people. And as young people, we absorb that mimetic experience around us. So he absorbed this remarkable perspective on the world, a European perspective, an African perspective, as well as the perspective of perhaps the most unique people in the world, the San people. He is a remarkable man in my mind, and he had a profound influence on me as a young person. I first read Van der Post at 17. He was spiritual advisor to the royal family. He was a great friend of Carl Jung. He says, I saw the reason why poetry, music and the arts are matters of survival, of life and death to all of us, and why Blake's Bushman sensibility could perceive that when the arts decayed, nations decayed. For the arts are both guardians and makers of this chain. They are charged with maintaining the Aboriginal movements in the latest edition of humankind. They make young and immediate what is first and eldest in the spirit of humans. And when I read that, I was 19 when I read it, I was not involved in the Kodály world at all. But I couldn't help but continue to ponder what this was. I'd been involved in music to make young and immediate what is first and oldest in humankind. The arts are guardians and makers of the chain. In the modern world, we are very interested in making, in creativity, in my personal expression. And that whole world of creativity, I think, has become a little unhinged. I think Van der Post would say there is a much deeper reason for us to maintain the chain, the whole chain. And if we now think in terms of memes, where we are now is a reflection of where we've come from. It must be. Kodály knew this. He didn't know Van der Post. Certainly this was written much later. But Kodály understood that who we are now is who we were then, and that we must continue to maintain that chain, and that the makers are still part of the chain. I wonder if Kodály felt that the chain had been broken somehow for him in Hungary, and that he was trying to reform that chain, to reconnect the Hungarian people. Do I feel that we as Australians, our chain has been broken? I went to school when music went out of schools. There was no music at school. I just learned piano. I didn't have that continuous experience of music that I know other people did. And I knew that as a young teacher, I was trying to give back to our people the chain, to reconnect them to the chain. He says, they are charged, the arts are charged with maintaining the Aboriginal movements in the latest edition of humankind. The latest edition, our children. The Aboriginal movements, the oldest, most profound part of us. They make young and immediate what is first and eldest in the spirit of humans. Young and immediate. Let me give you a little example here. My grandmother, there seems to be a theme in the conference, my grandmother loved Danny Boy. She loved it. And every time she came to our house, I had to play Danny Boy. Wouldn't you like to hear just something else? I played the Danny Boy. And just about every time, she cried. That was okay. As a young person, and I was quite young, I was watching this older person crying and kept thinking, But I knew that this song was so important for her generation. They sang the song while all of the men were at war. 2 of her brothers died there. This song was so laden with emotion, and if we're talking about memes, as a young person, I absorbed it. But I didn't feel Danny Boy the same way that she did. But it became part of who I was. More broadly, I was brought up in a profoundly Catholic circle. Very, very Catholic. For me then, when I first went to the Vatican, I walked in the door, and the first thing on the right is the pietà. And I cried for 2 hours. And I still do every time. It's a meme. It so profoundly speaks to me. It's hundreds of years old. I know very little about sculpture, but so much of what I grew up amongst is wrapped up in that particular piece of sculpture, that piece of art. This isn't the only time it happens to me. When I saw The Mission, the movie made me weep. And it wasn't just the sort of angst in the movie, but the whole much bigger and broader thing. It touched me so deeply. When I first heard the Strauss Last Lieder, I don't speak German, but man, that music profoundly moved me. Joseph Campbell would talk about archetypes. They line our internal world. And the archetypes are things which help us understand the world as humans. And when we feel that emotion, it's doing its job. There's something in me that recognises that's how it is. And it moves me to tears. And I'm not worried about it, and I'm not frightened by it. It's right because it is laden with meaning. I wrote a PhD on meaning, musical meaning, but I could easily write another PhD on personal meaning. In our modern day world, we talk a lot about happiness, the Happiness Project. We do lots of things in our schools to check that our children are happy. We try and make happiness, as if happiness was the greatest virtue. Van der Post again, prisoner of war under the Japanese, and he explains that happiness was not important. Of course they were unhappy. It was a vile situation. He said what kept them going were the people they loved at home, was a sense of where they belonged and where they needed to go to. It was a sense of meaning. Van der Post will always argue for meaning over happiness. A lack of happiness won't kill you. A lack of meaning will. We see it in our young people all the time. Don't be frightened of being unhappy. You'll get over that. Moment by moment, I get myself over it. Unhappiness is not the issue. It's the lack of meaning. And so we come a full circle back to the memes. An understanding of what it is that we're doing, what it is we inherit from one another, what it is we get from our broader culture. And you and I are involved in the process of trying to induct our children into a sense of meaning. Can I encourage you to do it? I can't tell you how deep my respect for you is. I work in schools, I went back to school, and it's hard work. But every moment that a child finds something new in the world is a great moment. Today, or throughout the conference, we've talked about this notion of identity. And I guess I'm trying to tie together some ideas of Kodály, some very popularist ideas around Facebook and some of those sorts of notions, some biological ideas, and I'm asking you to continue on with the work that you're doing. While it mightn't feel like you are supported, keep going. I'm unhappy about the fact that they put my 3 arts electives against one another. It doesn't alter my sense of meaning when I work with the children. I'm just unhappy about it. It's not going to stop me from teaching. All of the petty things that irritate us are just dross. Don't get caught up in it and don't worry about it. You know that the work you do is so valuable. Keep it on. Thanks, everyone.